The Clampetts at Hill's Mansion weren't only witty, relatable, and straightforward. Hollywood-related stories can occasionally be teeming with drama that never reached both on the screen and in relation to Nancy. The tale of Culp and Buddy Ebsen is the type that causes you to sag slightly more intimate with the Beverly Hillbillies. Put both of these under the same spotlight. Already their lives were full of the types of encounters that could fill whole books, but the point is that actually took place prior to that legendary show. Creates the tense situation that later on, let's simmer between them. First of all, Nancy wasn't your usual Harrisburg-born Hollywood star. She was the only kid born in Pennsylvania to Marjorie Culp, and Robert's father was a traveling salesman who was constantly on the go. Her mother balanced teaching, and later Nancy grew up to become a school principal. In an educational and structured world relocating to Miami while still a young woman, she had obtained a degree in journalism and appeared to have a bright future. Rather than in front of the enclosure, behind it, yet Nanny's journey wasn't a camera. She was writing for The Straight Shot, a local publication called Miami Beach Tropics, speaking with well-known people like Clark Gable and dignitaries such as the Duke and Duchess of Not Quite Small Potatoes, isn't Windsor? Afterward, World War II arrived, and Nancy, without hesitation, she dropped out of school to become a member of the U.S. Naval Reserve and see her youthful and resolute, obtaining the title of lieutenant, currently serving her country. Let's take a moment to stop there and flip. Buddy Ebsen gave him the penny, and he was as far away from Nancy as possible. Friend, I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. Wished to dance when he was with his Vilma. Sister performed in vaudeville. They were constructed to be the baby of the staircase. Buddy exuded a carefree, effortless appeal. His dancing was adored by everyone, but life wasn't all sunshine and roses when my friend to New York with a meager budget to get a sandwich because he knew he needed to hurry. The effort paid off when Broadway arrived. Hollywood was not far away when they called. Behind a friend who got parts in musicals, Shirley Temple and I danced, and even got Walt Disney personally asked for assistance. Make Mickey Mouse's movements come to life, but weren't as remarkable as Buddy's career faced a significant obstacle when he was chosen to be the, it sounds like, Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. Similar to a dream job, but not so much. The aluminum dust was present in the cosmetics they applied. He almost died, and he ended up in the hospital, and someone was given the duty. After that, the friend looked for other jobs such as teaching and sailing. During World War II, naval officers may have been relaxed, but life had now given him his share of KNX. Imagine Nancy and Buddy, two individuals from entirely distinct universes, both with their own peculiarities and motivations over time. When the 1950s arrived, Nancy had relocated. However, she had married and moved to Hollywood. It ended abruptly, and a position in MGM's A director in the publicity department noticed. She believed she had the face for. Soon after, she began to appear in Tiny, playing a variety of jobs from maid to an inebriated waitress. I Love Lucy, on. Although Maverick Nancy wasn't a famous woman, she was skilled at stealing scenes. With her keen sense of humor and her upbeat demeanor. In the meantime, Friend was occupied with creating he had room on television for himself. Talent for playing down-to-earth folk music characters that viewers were unable to assist but love. He had established a reputation already as a trustworthy individual who was pleasant to work with at the very least. That's how he appeared to the majority. But this is where things became intriguing. By Nancy's late 50s, and Buddy's paths have begun to intersect. They weren't in the television industry, not yet operating side by side, but the Nancy was making a living in a little town. Repute as an intelligent, diligent actress, but she was also adamant about and didn't hesitate to express her opinions. Conversely, Buddy was renowned for perhaps even a little more conventional, traditional, and fervent in his opinions prior to the arrival of the Beverly Hillbillies. Both of them were pursuing opportunities. Everywhere they went, Nancy had a string of appearances as a guest on well-known shows. She lacked the stereotypical Hollywood appearance, and she was aware of it, yet that didn't stop her. She focused on playing in her own style. Characters that are memorable and unusual. Friend Com was alternating between westerns, dramas, and the odd comedic moment. He wasn't hesitant to assume positions that displayed a darker side, either by performing antagonists on television programs such as Gunsmoke, and by the early 1960s, Maverick had both established themselves in Hollywood through their separate paths. But neither of them had discovered really significant breakthrough role. But that was about to veer off track with the Hillbillies in Beverly. When Hillbillies appeared on TV, it was similar to a people couldn't move away from rocket firing off. This is enough of the Clampetts. A family in the backcountry is abruptly encircled by the show. Beverly Hills glitz was humorous, endearing, and somewhat absurd. and it captured the attention of millions of viewers in a single week. Nancy Culp was at the center of it this week, and Buddy Ebsen at the time, the authors of when they cast the Beverly Hillbillies, they realized they needed a unique player. Jane Hathaway, the bird of efficiency keeping an eye on Mr. Dale's secretary Nancy, the Clampett's banker, was an ideal fit. And by that time, he was a well-known figure in the field, his relaxed manner and talent for performing. He was a wise, father figure who made him, and Jed Clampett was an obvious option. Jed was a guy as the Clampett family's pillar. Having minimal formal schooling but a wealth of common sense friend, provided comfort and appeal to the part, transforming Jed into viewers believed they could rely on and support for the show's debut. It was, and people adored the fish out of the sea right away. A family's water story from the Ozarks hitting oil and entering a Beverly methods that conflict with the ostentation of Beverly Hills produced a variety of amusing miscommunications, and correct Nancy was in the center of it all. Culp in the role of Miss Jane. Miss Jane wasn't just any secretary, she was intelligent, devoted, and frequently the rational voice when Mr. Dale, her employer, became a bit too avaricious. Truly have concern for the Clampetts, particularly Jethro, Jed's nephew, and, if you've seen the show before, right? Miss Jane harbored a mild romantic interest in Jethro. Nancy entertained her with a variety of heart and humor that you were unable to assist but adore her. In fact, she won an Emmy. Recommendation for Buddy's Jed's portrayal was equally iconic, was what kept the family together. Ellie was upset when Granny caused difficulties. May's gentleness charmed everyone. Jethro stumbled through one of them. Jed stayed in a crazy scheme after another calm. He was the sensible voice in a chaotic family, and that his "well doggies" catchphrase became a component of American popular culture. Yet this, where matters become somewhat complex on Nancy and Buddy's characters on the screen, had a cordial, off-screen relationship. The tension between them is not as great, didn't originate from their methods of acting or no, it was their professionalism. Something more profound about their characters, and more crucially, their opinions toward the world, clashed in unimaginable ways. Ignored, you see. Pal was politically traditional, and he didn't hesitate to Nancy, expressing his thoughts about the other, leaning more liberally. The hand wasn't merely differing viewpoint, it was a fundamental difference in their perceptions of the imagine working with someone in the modern world. Daily figure who represents everything you, Nancy, and I disagree with that. Buddy was coping with in accordance with. They would engage in these with other cast members. Intense arguments that might go on for weeks at a time. Finally, it wasn't merely lighthearted banter, or despite the lighthearted banter, it was serious. Both actors maintained their intensity. They were professional on the set of the show. Was a huge success, attracting weekly millions of viewers. For then it was the most popular television program, and its appeal didn't diminish quickly. Clampetts were adored by people in there, as much as Nancy and Buddy's antics may have differed in person, but they made their personalities come to life. Miss Jane was flawlessly Nanny's and became one of the show's most adored characters. She wasn't over the top or ostentatious, but she was approachable, and the type of someone who put in a lot of effort, tried to act morally, and consistently appeared to become entangled with someone other people's mess, and while she's crushing on Jethro may have been made fun of, it also had a charming quality. Meanwhile, the steady was Buddy's Jed. Clampetts being guided by hand through one absurd circumstance after absurd circumstance, if he was attempting to understand Beverly Hills high society, or assisting Granny prepares another dish of moonshine, Jed never lost his composure. It makes sense why viewers tuned in the week after week to observe the Clampetts' actions next. But despite all of the achievements, Nancy and Buddy's conflict never truly disappeared. Some claim it got. As the show progressed, it wasn't only there was a personality conflict in politics. Nancy was a perceptive thinker who didn't give up a battle, but he may be charming, but he could also be obstinate when those two forces came into contact. It didn't help that the spectacle had sparks flying. Confined them in close proximity, like Miss Jane and Jed shared many scenes together, jointly, and even though they may have grinned and chuckled while watching, a hint of annoyance that those who were listening were unable to disregard Donna Douglas's portrayal of Ellie. May once said that they would quarrel for weeks regarding their divergent opinions. How tight must that set have been? Remained unchanged. Both of them were professionals, and they kept their arguments to themselves. Destroy the show, but that doesn't mean it was simple, but maintaining a polite demeanor while collaborating so closely with someone you clash that requires work. But they succeeded it off, and viewers never seen the bubbles of tension beneath the surface. When the Beverly Hillbillies arrived, ended its existence, It had developed into a cultural something that people continue to discuss now, and its impact is evident in numerous other performances for Nancy and Buddy. But the show's conclusion didn't signify the conclusion of their tale. The disparities would continue to influence how they continued to connect after the cameras stopped rolling. Nancy made the decision to take a very different approach to politics in years after the conclusion of the show in 1984. She contested to be a member of the U.S. House at the time. She was 62 years old, and several individuals asked whether an actress might venture into Nancy thought she could contribute to politics. Anything worthwhile to the table following Ronald Reagan had already completed it, hadn't he? Nancy was a Democrat who ran in the 9th Congressional Assembly from Pennsylvania District. The race was difficult from the beginning. The district was firmly Bud Schuster, a Republican, and her opponent had already completed 6 terms. But Nancy was not the type to back down from a fight. She made a concerted effort to engage with individuals and expressing her change-related views, despite being aware that the chances were against her, giving it everything she had. Didn't anticipate that Buddy Ebsen would enter the battle rather than supporting her. Friend with no connection to Pennsylvania or the race offered their services to record a radio advertisement for her rival in the one he called Nancy, was criticized of being overly liberal. Influencing others with her celebrity status voters, it wasn't merely a dispute that was personal, and Nancy was taken aback by she and her friend. Had grown up, although on a completely new level. This seemed like a betrayal. Nancy didn't hesitate to discuss it later, stating that her friend had no business interfering and ought to have avoided it. He's not the old Jed Clampett you observed on in one interview, she stated. Evidently irritated, she also made it evident that although they had never received, she would never have done it alone. You may say something like that to him. Even years later, hear the anguish in her words. After the fact that the advertisement didn't assist any campaign. In fact, it could have been detrimental. She suffered a severe defeat in the election margin, with her rival stealing more. Nancy received more than 66% of the vote following claimed she didn't hold her friend responsible. Defeat, but the pain of what he did remained with her when she departed Pennsylvania, to give her mind some space before returning only when she'd had a chance to think what had transpired on his end. Buddy didn't appear to feel bad about what he'd done at the time. He was convinced of what he'd stated about Nancy and maintained its integrity. Yet as the years went by, it seemed that even he began to regret something at the end of his life. He apologized for the advertisement and their feuds. Unfortunately, things went out of control by afterward. It was too late to completely repair the Nancy and her friend's friendship. Minimal communication following the campaign, and their reconciliation was short-lived. Teaching with enthusiasm was a source of comfort for Nancy. That enabled her to express her combining expertise and experience into something significant. She turned to art, and a little apartment at Juniata College Liberal Arts School tucked away in the serene countryside of Pennsylvania there. She encouraged and instructed acting classes. Innumerable pupils who passed through her doors of the classroom throughout her stay at Juniata appeared to mark to be a quiet period in her existence. Away from the dazzling lights of Hollywood and the political upheaval, Nancy discovered a group of people that appreciated her. For her wisdom and kindness toward pupils later expressed their admiration for not only for her fame in Hollywood, but for her commitment to serving others grow. She gave her heart and humor. Teachings that give her pupils the impression that the stage might serve as a gathering spot for everyone. It's simple, regardless of where they're from. To picture her grinning while sharing tales from her time spent on the Beverly Hillbillies, offering guidance on Nancy's life on and off the stage, furthermore performed in local theatrical productions, and sometimes made television appearances as a guest. Never really stopped performing even as she turned her attention to. She was obviously passionate about teaching. Craft and her subsequent creations demonstrated a profound understanding of the strength of narrating stories. But she didn't merely pretend to lead a rich and active life outside of the attention. Nancy was good at having a strong connection with others, whether it were her students, neighbors, or friends, and she maximized her time in. But in 1990, Nancy encountered a further obstacle when her cancer diagnosis was made. In spite of the diagnosis, she continued to be resolved to keep teaching and continue to be involved in her community, as long as her condition permitted. Friends and her co-workers characterized her as courageous and strong, traits she had displayed during her lifetime. She died in 1991, establishing an impact that endured much more than just Miss Jane. The tale of Hathaway Nee was among perseverance, inventiveness, and a refusal to be characterized by a single period of her life. In the meantime, pal Ebsen followed his own route. However, in those final years, he remained in his work in the entertainment business, slowed down after the Beverly as he grew older. Hillbilly's friend continued to behave, playing parts in television and films. He even starred in a well-known detective show, Barnaby Jones. It detained him for a number of years in the spotlight, but regardless of what he did, people feel compelled to associate him with the character of Jed Clampett. His distinctive charm and homegrown charm, the catchphrase, was now bigger than life. However, he appeared unconcerned with the connection, at least not externally. He accepted the affection that fans felt for Jed, even if it meant being stereotyped every now and then. However, in private, it wasn't always simple. Imagine pursuing a job that is filled with diversity and skill that will only be recalled. Is still a calm Buddy for one position, handled it with grace, frequently showing up at occasions and conversations in which he joyfully remembered his time spent aboard the Beverly. He later wrote a memoir titled Hillbillies, sharing tales about his life and Hollywood career, as well as the notorious feud outside of acting. Nancy and her friend had a lot to do and was a skilled sailor and devoted a significant amount of on the ocean in his spare time. He also experimented with writing, penning books that provided him with a creative outlet outside of acting. Friend had always been a multifaceted individual, skills, and he discovered methods to remain active and continued to participate as the years passed, and his friend from his personal life had along Dorothy was not his third wife, and surrounded himself in his later years with. He lived with his family till the extraordinary age of 95, died in 2003, by which time the majority of his peers had long since passed away, and he was among the final surviving relationships. To television's golden age, his era came to an end with his death. Yet his legacy endured through the innumerable The Beverly Hillbillies repeats and the recollections of those who had worked. As he reflects on their past, it feels like two powerful objects colliding, individuals that simply were unable to locate. They shared a passion for gifted, strongly opinionated, and their disagreements caused a gap that was difficult to cross and is currently unachievable. To disregard the magic they produced appearing together on television as Miss Jane and Jed, they provided warmth and joy to millions of viewers, which is evidence of their competence and ability.